Hello and welcome to You Wellbeing. I'm Ashley Meyer and I'm here with my colleague Sarah Marshall. Hi Sarah.
Hi Ashley.
Hi. Today we want to talk about the maladaptive stress response, a very key area that we work on at You Wellbeing when we're working with ME and chronic fatigue syndrome. The maladaptive stress response, Sarah, what is stress in this context?
So when we think of stress is when there's a pressure on our system. It doesn't necessarily have to be cognitive or emotional, but that's what we tend to think about. When we say we're stressed, it's because we're mentally or emotionally stressed.
Yeah.
But it can be physical. But when we talk about the maladaptive stress response, we're talking more about a stress response, a fight and flight response that's got stuck on, basically.
I see. Okay. So you mentioned fight and flight, which is the term you often hear. What actually is it and what happens during fight and flight?
So the fight and flight response is our very primitive survival mechanism. So we have this mechanism that starts with the sensory organs, such as the eyes, the ears, the skin, and we're continually taking in information. And what happens, this information is monitored, and when a threat is picked up or perceived, then we go into this very physiological response. So although it starts with a perception or interpreting information a certain way, it's actually a very physical response to a perceived or actual threat.
Okay, so it is a survival mechanism.
It is, yeah.
How does that come to be? What actually happens physiologically?
Okay, so the fight and flight response hasn't really changed over the millennia that we've been around, basically. So it's a very old response that hasn't changed. Now, the response is geared up for the threats that we would have encountered, say, the Stone Age. So the threats in those days would have been a wild animal, a threat from another tribe or group, or a disagreement within our family group or local group.
Right.
So it's a very physical response. We geared up to fight or run because that was a way to resolve things back then. So what happens is the information comes through the limbic system, it gets interpreted, two pathways are triggered. One sets us into this alert, hypervigilant state.
Right.
It sets up our body's physiology to be able to fight or run. So our breathing increases, our heart rate increases, fuel is released from the liver so that we have the energy to fight.
Right.
So a number of systems that are vital for survival are upregulated, and the systems that are not vital for survival at that point are downregulated, such as the digestive system. So as I mentioned, there's two pathways. One takes in the information and interprets it as a danger anyway, just in case. So if a car's coming towards us, that's fantastic. We're not taking any chances and we're off.
Okay.
The second simultaneous pathway that goes through more of the organs or glands in the limbic system checks the relevance of the information coming through, and it might be that we've just seen something fly past, but it was a leaf or a coat coming down the road. And it's like, actually, I'm safe, I'm okay, and the flight or fight response is switched off.
Right, okay. But either way, when the fight and flight response is activated, once the system realises that the danger is over, then the body automatically calms down.
Yeah, it gets switched off, and what happens is the parasympathetic nervous system becomes more of the driving force, and that starts to upregulate the systems that are now vital to restore the balance and the repair that the fight or flight response has, the impact basically it's had on the system as a whole.
Okay, so that's when the fight and flight response is working well and working effectively.
Yeah.
But we know that that's not always the case.
No. So if we go back to prehistoric times, being chased by, say, a hungry animal is pretty stressful. Yeah, we're running literally for our lives, so there's a huge demand put on our system, and our system is built to sustain that demand. But the key factor is that we stay in it for short term. So if we're running from an animal, we're either going to be eaten or we're going to outrun it quite quickly. Yeah, it's going to be over quite quickly. The danger is going to be over one way or the other, and we very quickly come out of that response so the body can start the repair and restoring our resources pretty quickly. So it doesn't really have much of a long-term impact.
Okay. So the body is not built to sustain long periods of high stress.
No.
Okay. How's this relevant to ME then?
So if you think about ME, most people, as we know from taking their case histories, have had prolonged periods of stress beforehand. For some people, it goes back to very young childhood. For others, they've been through an intensely stressful period that's been long enough to start to take us into the chronic stress stage. Now, the chronic stress stage is where we have been in it too long, basically.
Right.
And the impact of that on our system is when our body and our system start to malfunction. So we start to get symptoms from the various systems being down-regulated or up-regulated.
I see. Okay. So when those symptoms happen, then what tends to happen in the case of ME and chronic fatigue syndrome?
So just from the very nature of the illnesses, as we know, as many people know, it takes quite a long time to get diagnosis.
Right.
That in itself is quite stressful. So a lot of the contributing factors that have continually triggered the fight or flight response may have gone because we no longer can physically work, we can no longer physically keep helping people when really we needed to be looking after ourselves.
Okay.
But because we can't find the answers, we're ill and we don't know what to do about it, we're ill and we don't know why we're ill, then perpetuating factors come in, and those very factors keep us in that stress response.
Okay, so being told just to sort of go home and sleep for a month is not going to do it, because you may not be sort of working or exposed to the regular stressors, but because you don't really know what to do and you don't have the answers, you actually sort of keep that sort of stress response going.
Exactly.
Okay.
So what we're doing is we're not adapting to the initial stressors no longer being present, and additional stresses are coming in. So this is why we call it the maladaptive stress response. We're maladapting to what's going on in our lives. Instead of going, okay, well, that danger's over now and I can relax, then we're being continually triggered around it. Okay,
so this now then starts to make sense why, for a condition that feels very physical in nature, why we would start working on the mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're looking at, okay, so although we experience very physical symptoms and fatigue, then we're looking at, okay, so what's the cause of this? And it goes back to stress. Okay, so what's the cause of stress? Well, it's either our reactions to it, the way that we're handling it. It could be internal stressors. So stress isn't just an external environment. A lot of it tends to be internal. And that's what we're looking at. So, okay, so what's going on to continually drive this this response? Okay,
so we're saying that actually really the maladaptive stress response is key.
Yeah.
Because if we don't remove those stressors or deal with that internal stress response, then the body's going to be in that maladaptive space where sort of the organs of the body are just either down-regulated or overly up-regulated, and so the whole sort of, it's like a domino effect, it all just sort of becomes out of sync.
Exactly, and the key point to note that we need to come out of this state into the relaxation response, where the parasympathetic nervous system takes over, because that's when we repair and we restore. If we're not going into that, then our body's almost blocking the resources coming in that we need to be able to recover from that acute stress or burnout.
Yeah,
the
indeed.
Chronic stress, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so I know that a number of people that come to us and that we work with initially will say, well, they don't feel stressed. Some people will obviously be aware of stress, but there's definitely a subset of people that will say, well, I don't feel stressed.
Yeah.
What is your sense of that?
So when we talk about stress and stress states, then we tend to talk in absolutes. So it's like, I'm either stressed or I'm calm. But it's actually a state on a continuum. So we've got extreme stress at one side, complete relaxation at the other side, and we tend to be on that continuum. Now, what we're supposed to do is we have pressure on us, it challenges us, stimulates us to do some good work, but then we're supposed to come more into the relaxation state to be able to recover from that. Now, what starts to happen because of this continual trigger is that we are more in the stress part of the continuum,
Right.
and we're there long enough for it to become our generalised state.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what happens is we normalise it. If we're in a state for long enough, it's like, well, this is how I always am.
Yeah.
It's kind of how I am, and we don't realise or recognise how stressed we actually are until we get some kind of contrast. So if we drop into a good relaxation state, we then will notice how stressed we would have felt before.
Okay.
And I know there's an analogy that we tend to use, the frog in the boiling water. Not quite sure whether it's true or not, but it's a good analogy to use, is if you put a frog into a boiling water, it'll jump straight out. But if you put a frog into a lukewarm water and gently heat it up, it will slowly acclimatise to it and it won't jump out, and apparently it dies.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure whether that's true or not, but it's a good analogy to use.
So really what we're saying is that actually the levels of stress keep increasing, and we adapt to them, we normalise them, and so it gets to a point where we actually don't even realise that the situation exists, but yet it's having this major physiological impact on our system, which therefore feels very, very physical in nature. So addressing the maladaptive stress response really is key. And many people realise that in some respect as well, and try meditation or different relaxation techniques, quite often not with the type of effect that's really needed.
No, because as we've been saying, it requires self-awareness, and it also requires self-awareness of what's happening on a continual basis. So if we go and do meditation, we get into a good state for an hour. Okay, so what are you doing the other 23 hours of the day? And if you're not looking at that, yes, it's great that you're getting that 1 hour of good relaxation, but it needs to filter into the rest of the day, and this is where...
Just start to make the shift.
Exactly. We need to shift along that continuum and spend more time in a lower state or a calmer state, so that becomes more of our generalised state, rather than going, okay, I'm dipping into that for an hour and then I'm going straight back to where I was before.
Okay. Sarah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley.
And if you would like further information about You Wellbeing, or you'd like to get some insights in how we work with the maladaptive stress response, please go to our website, www.uwellbeing.com. Thank you.
Thank you.